Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining Caregiving Cafe today. We are excited to have Elaine Scholly here today. Thank you for being here, Elaine. She's
Sure.
going to talk to us about her experience and introduce us to this Scholly stages, which is something I'm very curious about. She is an author and speaker and a lot of other wonderful things. So I will turn it over to Elaine to introduce herself much better than I have done. And we can also have a Q&A after her talk. But feel free to put something on the chat or just raise your hand and go ahead and speak with Elaine directly. So thank you so much for being here, Elaine. So take it away.
Thank you so much, Lynn. This is exciting to meet. I just moved to Austin just over a year ago, and so all of this meeting Lynn and getting involved with Austin and all this community here. It just this morning learning about the gathering. Even for me, I'm still learning things every time I touch with people and do things. Um, I was in Dallas. I lived in Dallas. I came from Dallas. I lived there for about 36 years and then moved here. But while I was there, I was very active in the Alzheimer's Association. I was a volunteer. Um, well, maybe I should go before that because my grandmother, years ago, before people really knew what Alzheimer's was in the early 80s, she had Alzheimer's. My mother also had it. She died of it in 2005. And when I retired, I started volunteering with the Alzheimer's Association in Dallas and did so for the better part of 8 to 10 years before 2020 hit. And I did a lot with them. I did the community education. I did workshops. I did support groups and everything. And there were many times when people would say, "Oh, Elaine, you should write a book." And then one time I did. I did, and I got it printed a couple years ago. But when I decided to do the book, it needed to be different because what I was finding out and hearing from all these people and that I had contact with is that they knew about Alzheimer's. They knew they were going to be caregivers and they were doing all these things and they had all this information, all these education things that I did with people and stuff. But yet in the end, they still had questions. They were still frustrated. So I, they didn't know what to do. So I knew this book had to be different. So I came up with the Scholly stages. And just like in Alzheimer's, it has you go through three stages. You have mild, moderate, and severe. So what the caregiver needs to do is to go through those same stages with not, well, you're with mom going through it, but it's got to be for them. And so what I started to do was to make it for them. What were the frustrations? So in stage one, it's the most important stage. And what I do is just simply list the different things that you need to be aware of, what to do, and then how to do it. It's all written down. In the most demanding stage, then you're in another area, and then the most difficult. And what I find is that caregiving is what I call universal, and it doesn't matter if they have Alzheimer's or if they're taking care of a child, somebody with a disability, someone with Z, they're recovering from a stroke. There's still part of caregiving that's going to always need the same information. And so what I'm trying to bring to all this is, what does the caregiver need to do for themselves? And that's what's going to be important. A lot of talking about it, but then I want to do the motivation to bring people to find out for themselves what they need to do. It's going to be it's an inside journey. If anybody's familiar with Henry David Thoreau, he says, things don't change, we change. So when we find that wall that you hit, and I said, I don't know what to do, well, that wall's not going to move. So the only way we're going to get over it and get through this is to figure out what we need. We need to change our attitude to figure out what we need to do it, and without being totally lost in the process. So that would be anything from uh, let's see. I don't want to where it's a lot of places to start. So the most important stage is, do we know what Alzheimer's is? Do we know what that is? There's a lot of learning and listening. We hear what Alzheimer's is, we hear what caregiving is and what's necessary to be done, but what do we do about it? How is everybody with their listening? Do everybody feel they're good listeners? That we listen to what's going on and everything? I know that there are times when I'm listening to people. This is when we need, and just real quick, the name of my book is Be Aware and Prepared. So this is also to to figure out what we need to do. It's called Alzheimer's Be Aware and Prepared. So what we need to do, if you're listening, how many people, when you're on the phone or if you're just talking to somebody and you're really not totally engaged with what they're saying, and what are some of your thoughts? No, what am I going to have for dinner? Is the traffic going to be bad on the way home? Have we really listened to everything they're saying? And I think through life, when you're with a kid growing up or whether you're at work and somebody's telling you something, are you really listening to what they're saying? Because if you don't hear everything that's being said, your response can't be what they need to know. Okay. And people are aware when you're listening to them or not. They can tell whether you're listening, particularly an Alzheimer's patient or a dementia patient. With them, you have to be engaged. You have to make the engagement happen. And if they can tell you're not listening, then their message isn't getting across to you. Then the other thing I talk about is using the senses. I know when you're taking care of somebody, um, how we uh, okay, I don't know how to best to say this. Your senses. So when you're hearing something, do we listen or hear? Can you hear that? That's a question. Do we listen or hear? So they're not the same thing.
Mm-mm.
So we can hear stuff. I can hear the street cleaner going in front of my house. Okay. I can hear that. Uh, but am I listening to it? So if somebody's talking to you, you hear that something's going on, but are you listening? Because to listen, the brain needs to be focused. You can't be thinking about something else. You need to be thinking about what they're saying. So the messages we give and the messages that you receive are important. So when you're listening to somebody, are you receiving what they're saying? And then when you give an answer back, you're giving back how well you were listening to them. So how does this all go into caregiving? When you're talking to your husband in bed who has a hard time moving, or your mom who, whatever your situation is, mom can't do something, or you're frustrated because uh, mom can't, I say mom, just to be sure, mom is going to be the patient. I'm not going to be individuals with patient and loved one. I'm just going to say mom. So when mom, she's made you frustrated because she's doing the same thing over and over and over again. And you want to go, mom, stop that. What do we do in that situation? What do we need to do in that situation? You take a deep breath, say, okay, if I'm going to get through this for the next decade, when these little moments come up, we need to start to address them in different ways. Okay, mom, why is that interesting? Why is that happen? Why do you want to have, what are you trying to get done? And when you do that, you're making contact with her. You're letting her know that you're thinking about her, or you're interrupting her. It depends on what she's doing. It's like, what? And what you need to do is, if it's a helpful thing, you need to assess your situation and figure out calmly, take that deep breath, and you think about how she hears you. How is she, what is she receiving from you? Your interest? Is she concerned? How are you going to help her with what she's trying to accomplish? Or maybe she's just being ornery. You know, everybody's going to have a different situation. A good book to read is You're Not Listening by Kate Murphy. It's You're Not Listening, and I think the subtitle is Why Is That Important? And why do we need to do this? And it's full of ideas and information about how we don't listen. We do she calls it a when you're trying to, when somebody's talking to you and you're not listening, she calls it like a mind reset. You've taken a side trip, a mind side trip. You're not really listening to what's going on. And what we have to learn and what we have to do, and what I try to make important in the most important stage, is that we need to begin to make that communication. You have to build that communication between people, whether they're sick in bed or whether they're arguing with you about going to the daycare center. We need to address these situations in different ways so that we listen better. And that way, when you talk to them, they'll listen to you better. And then you get a cooperation between the two. And why is this important? Because you're building, especially in this first important, when you're first doing this, when it's all new to you, Z, and it's all new, you're building that relationship. You're building a new relationship with someone who is not listening or you feel isn't listening, and you want to build trust in that relationship. And by doing that, you're giving them a good give and take. You're listening and going back and forth with each other so that they're not constantly being pushed, or that you're not listening to me, you're not doing anything. You want them to understand you're going to be there for them. We're going to get through this together. And to do that, they may not, depending on where they are and what your situation and caring for them, we have to assess what is good, how we're going to make this work. So a lot of this impetus is put on the caregiver, but if we do this correctly and we do it through like Z was saying, it may be a long, a lifelong journey for them. Brian is going to be something a little bit different, but we still have to make that relationship so that you don't constantly. What was that? Did somebody ask a question?
Okay, no, I think that it sounded like Z. Z, I think you might need to mute your laptop.
Me?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I'm gonna mute you. Okay, let me see. I'm gonna mute you. Okay.
Okay. I just want to make sure somebody wasn't saying something, because
okay.
And don't hesitate to say what you go ahead and you can interrupt, because this is at the most important stage. One of the first important things to do is to learn to listen, and what we're giving to each other, because that is going to establish what the next decade, the next lifelong journey is going to be, how that relationship is going to work. Because if you deny that anything's going on, and we're not going to do this, and we're going to do this my way, and what is wrong with you, and our tone of voice is important. If you do all those things, the relationship isn't building, isn't being strengthened. What it is it's producing friction. It's producing, and if it continues that way, it's just going to get worse. Because at the end of this caregiving time, we want to have, it's not going to change. It's going to be very hard. But at the end, we want to have some memories that we can go back and say, I had a relationship with this person. You don't want it to end with like, oh, I'm glad this is over. I can have my life now. And we want to have memories because they're important. They're important. And that's what we want to build during this time. So in my book, there is, it builds out, it is tilted towards Alzheimer's a lot, but it's how we start from what is a problem, what isn't a problem, what is happening in the brain, what causes Alzheimer's. That way, when you know what's happening and what the brain and body connection is, you start to understand what is going on. Z, it's going to be different for you. It's not exactly the same, but you have to understand that communication. What Kate Murphy tells in that book is there's a different way to communicate in different situations, but the situations are all different, but our response to that needs to be consistent. And what is consistent? That means it's not going to be the same one all the time. It means you're going to be thoughtful and think about what your response is going to be and what is going to be helpful. I'm not sure who said it in their introduction, might have been Z says, trying to be positive. It can't be trying. We have to be positive. Even in the worst situations and the worst and negativeness, if you're around negativity, you really need to go away from it. If you have a negative relative who's just always, yeah, it needs to change. And so either ask them to change or guess what? Yeah, you bet.
Sorry to interrupt, but
No, no, no.
you just described my mom.
Right.
Never satisfied, never happy. Everything is black, black, black. And uh, is so how do I say desgastante? It's so I mean, it wears you down.
Yes.
Wears you down trying to but really, you're right. I cannot change her, even though I say, no, mom,
Right.
listen at the birds. Oh my God, those birds. She said, no, mom, the birds are really singing really nicely, you know? That's one thing. And the other thing, the other question, can I address 2 points or one by one?
No,
Go right
go
ahead.
ahead.
And the other thing is, my dad used hearing aid. Okay? So I have the app, he has the app. So what I try to do first is make sure that they're at the right volume setting. Because
Right.
if not, guess what? Yeah. So that is another thing. When a person cannot sometimes you think
Communicate.
they communicate. No. Listen to what you're trying to communicate. Because then you get the wrong answer, and then you said no, but I'm talking about this. So kind of confusing. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, ideas. Thank you.
And yeah, no. And again, this is where I say so much of this becomes I can say you can do this in this situation, you can do that in that situation, but that situation may only show up once in a while. Almost every time, there's something little different about it that doesn't cause it, but it makes it necessary to be consistent with yourself to say, okay, don't let him. Well, what about this? Well, what about that? Or the birds are singing. And when they go, well, yeah, mom, the birds are going to always be singing. You have to. It's like I say, you have to have your own little library of responses in your mind, and you have, and that comes from experience. The more you do something, you begin to figure out what works. And maybe for your mother, just as a thought, is a lot of times a diversion. If the birds upset her, then we'll say, well, mom, well, look, what about this? And find something and have something in your little library that that she might be positive about, because you know what? She's just saying birds at that moment, but you can change her mind and her direction with just another thought of, well, but do you like tangerines? Hey, let's have some fruit. Find whatever it is that your mother does like, or would at least you're just changing the subject from the birds. And so that is where what I'm talking about, what we're giving, it's going to be up to us because mom's not going to change. It's up to us. Okay, if she's this way, what can we do to help both of us get through this moment that we're trying to talk about? And what happens is, not unfortunately, but it is best if we learn this early on, because then there is a connection between them. You're building that trust before that confusion gets really better. And oddly enough, if you do that at the beginning, then later on, when she's scared or upset or doesn't understand why the birds are screaming, she'll say, Yvette, Yvette, the birds, the birds. And so she looks to you. What we're trying to build is an opportunity for them to look to you. You are going to be their help. They're going to help them do this. Then you have the advantage of going, okay, mom, let's do this. And you're not curing her. You're not making the birds any better. They may come back again, but you're getting through that moment so that you both can go through that moment. Like, oh, okay. And then pretty soon you don't notice that just becomes a way of reacting. And within time, she will react, whether you know it or not, in time, they will react different to you too, because especially with the dementia, and I'm sure with the stroke, their ability to communicate gets less and less, and they are aware of it. Mostly, until they in the late stages when they really don't know what's going on, they are aware that this is going on. And to have that one strength, that one person, that one trustful person that they can rely on, they will begin to. Sometimes you may not like it later on because they're going to want you because they want you because you're developing that relationship with them, and they're going to turn to you all the time. Well, they get confused, they're scared, they don't know what's going on, and you become that person that they're going to rely on. And that's why is that? Because we've trained ourselves to react differently so that when they do something, we're not going to react with them. We're going to react differently. And that's going to make a big difference because as we go through the different stages, I call the second stage the most demanding stage. And because it's what it is, it gets demanding, that you'll start hearing that, they begin to start asking you, I need this, I need that, this isn't working. It starts with little things and then it gets bigger. And you want to be prepared for that. And everybody's going to be different, particularly with Alzheimer's and with stroke victims. Nobody is going to be exactly the same. So as a caregiver, you're the one that's trying to feel out what is the best way, what is the best reaction to do. And that is going to be up to us, but it's a lot easier to do that than to continually fight a wall that's always there. You want to break that wall down so that we're thinking about different things. It's basically, I'm just trying to get a fresh approach because caregivers, I think what I've experienced is they start to fall into the same thing because we don't know what to do. It's kind of like, well, my hair's on fire, I don't know what to do. And they just start doing things. And what we want to do is to put out the fire and say, okay, I'm going to start here and see if that works. If that doesn't work, then I'll start here. Let me see what we do. The relationships. I don't know. Is everybody more or less past that early stage? Because sometimes I will talk a lot about the early stages, but it sounds like everybody's pretty much beyond that because in the beginning, many people say, well, mom's fine. That's just normal aging. She's just forgetting things. But a lot of times memory at the beginning, when I think Brian said your wife had MCI, at that point, it's not always memory. It's more of a behavior. There are behavior changes. Like if mom was always a cook and she knew she didn't need a recipe to make chocolate chip cookies or her chocolate cake or her lasagna. She didn't need a recipe. But now when you go over, you notice that she's pulling down the recipe and having to use, her behavior has changed. Maybe everybody went to mom's house on Sunday for dinner. And now you start going over and she's not like ready. Well, you want to say she's forgotten. Usually what happens there, she doesn't have an interest. She's lost the interest in it. Large crowds, people with conversations, they begin to where they can't follow conversations. And at that time, it's more of a personal thing for them. It says, okay, well, I just won't talk because I don't know what's going on. So a lot of times at the beginning, you don't even know you're a caregiver yet. You start hearing and realizing, you start to notice small things. And it could be the way home from church. Mom got lost coming home from church, or she got lost. She comes home from the hairdresser. Well, geez, it's 4:00 in the afternoon. Where's mom? And she gets home and she goes, oh, yeah, well, I got lost. Well, what it was is she couldn't find her way. And these moments, especially in that MCI, that early stage, they might only happen maybe 3 or 4 times a year. They could go on for a long time and they seem normal. I mean, oh yeah, that's just normal aging. But if they get worse and if they become more frequent, that's what's going to set them apart from other aging changes. So that is the time to set up that relationship and build that trust so that we go into the most difficult time, which it appears that everybody is. I think Brian and Yvette mom is there, but she's like getting demanding. She's You need to do things that has to be done like right now and what we're going to be doing. And it's taking more of your time. You need to be spending more time with mom and what's going on. And so that is that's a big change. At the beginning, it's like, okay, my life is still kind of being the same, but now as it becomes more demanding, more time is being spent with your loved one, with mom, uh, with your husband. Now you're seeing for the first time, this is my new life that I have to be doing this. So what adjustments need to be made to survive that? Because he's not going to change. Your life is changing, but we have to make it change the way we want it to. Does that make sense? It has to fit around what I'm going to be doing and what I can do, what my limitations are. So this is what we're going to be learning. This is what you want to learn in this next stuff, in this next, excuse me, stage. Let's see. Because we want to, there's going to be moments, what I call gifts of time. You have time where you need to take advantage of that time, where you can, whether it's just time alone, or maybe when you're talking to your husband or your mom, your wife, and you just realize this is the time I have. I want to make it the best it can be. I don't want it to be a hair on fire situation all the time. And so this becomes personal. I can sit and talk. I'm going to talk and I can tell you all these things. But what it amounts to is then you have to take this and make it your own. You have to figure out how you're going to do it. I can tell you all kinds of things. We can take, what do they say? How do you eat an elephant or how do you eat a whale? You do it one step at a time or one bite at a time. You're not going to solve all the problems in one big time. So if you're in a situation, you figure that out and what I need to do right then. And then guess what? It's going to be different the next time. But so what are we doing? We're trying to get that so that we accept that and know that you need to be ready. That's where you start with experience. You get that in your mind that you start to learn how to respond to some of these things. Lynn, should I stop and ask questions right now if anybody wants to chime in?
Yeah, you can. Anybody have any questions? I love everything you've said so far. Any questions, comments? Yeah.
I have another question. You were talking about the senses.
Mm-hmm.
But you only talked about listening.
Right.
I found that. That's okay. That's okay. No, because I found out when I took care of we're 5 siblings. They all left, and they left me with my parents by myself. Nobody was coming to the rescue, anything. So my dad was making cry. The nurses was so angry. So he was making the nurses cry. The maids cried. My mama angry. Oh my gosh. So what I did was I sat on the floor. I took my hand to his knee. I mean, touching, or to his heart, or to his, whatever he would allow. And I would look at him and make him listen to me.
Yes.
And I said things like, Dad, these people are working. These people are doing the best they can. They're so sweet. They're so nice, whatever. And you are making my mom have a bad day. And why? What do you need? But I felt, and then it developed and he calmed down. Another thing was he was breathing like, so he would breathe. I would put my hand in his heart and said, Dad, we do like.
Take a big breath. Exactly.
Yeah, because I do yoga. So. But he changed. I mean, the anger was gone and he was the sweet man that I perceived. My sister won't perceive like him, but that I perceived. I mean, and now he's all of a sudden, yeah, he started crying. He started other things, but he didn't get angry anymore. Once I start and he doesn't like kissing and hugging and anything, but a touch,
yeah,
eye to eye, and listening to him, praying to God. And praying to God. I mean, I'm not a miracle worker. I don't even know what I was doing, but I know God is so faithful. He was helping me.
Mhm.
And I said to my sisters, "Did you have any complaints about my dad while I was taking care of him?" Because they usually would say, "Hey, the nurse wants to leave,"
Right.
or yeah. So touching.
Hair
I
on
I
fire.
hair's on fire.
Yeah.
Hair's on fire. Hair's on fire. Right. So I found with my dad, touching was like,
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you're right, Yvette. The senses, because I didn't go because um, the senses as a whole, particularly with usually what happens is as the in Alzheimer's as it progresses more and more, and the communication, the talking part starts to leave. What do we have left? We have what did you say? We have sight, we have hearing, and well, smell and taste is another thing, but touch, all of that. Just and my family wasn't a big touchy feely family, but in the end, my yes, when you just reach over and particularly somebody with Alzheimer's and they're in a community, if they're in a community and they can sometimes be really dependent on how far along they are when they go to a community, they might feel lost or whatever. And whether it's the family or even because we have professional caregivers who are out there in these communities that help people. And if you watch them touch, like if mom's doing something or they're upset, just touching them on the shoulder. And that's that relationship that you build early on so that if they're feeling tense or something and you're
mhm,
there and you just kind of
mhm,
touch them or you hold their hand, that's comforting for them. Uh, and if you're, this has always been a rule that if you're speaking with somebody who's in bed or in a wheelchair or something, is don't look down on them like this. What is that? That's you're looking down on them. You want to get to their level and be eye level with them and touch. And I love the putting the hand on the chest to calm him down. Just to that's perfect. So that everybody figures out how they want to do it. I have a YouTube channel. It's called Alzheimer's. Let's Talk Alzheimer's with Elaine Scholly. It's called Let's Talk Alzheimer's with Elaine Scholly. And if you just Google Let's Talk Alzheimer's, boom, it'll show up. There might be some other things there, but with Elaine Scholly's there. And I have videos about the senses and how you use the senses as a tool. When I was saying about trying to get diversions, Z or Brian, when if you can't get them to really think or talk about something, one of the diversions would be, Mom, I remember. I remember. Do you remember when we went to the beach? We went to the beach and when you do something like you're bringing a memory back for them for something that they can talk about, and they forget about the birds and they forget about whatever is the problem or that they don't like the caregiver who came in because they hurt their knee or something. You know, what you're doing is bringing them back to something that they remember, that they like to do, that they live on a farm. Do you remember how smelly those pigs were? Or I remember driving in the car on the interstate, and we'd be there and like, oh, the smell of skunk. Remember when we were going to Florida and they hit a skunk and oh, the whole thing. So whatever you find
yeah,
that was fun, riding a Ferris wheel. What did they like to do? What was their interest? Were they carpenters or maybe they liked gardening and say, oh, wasn't the grass? I remember when they would cut the grass and it smelled so good. So these are moments where you can take, particularly through the demanding and particularly in the most difficult stages when they're really less lucid about things and you've built that trust and they know they'll recognize, they may not recognize anybody else, but when you come in, even if it's your voice those final stages, that final stage, they'll recognize you. And because what are you doing? You're going to have them talk about things that they know about. And so that's what you're not changing the world. You're not changing their disease, but you're making these moments while you're going through this to be very personal and what you're doing, because things that we do now like this are going to be your memories for the future. And little things. Another thing I talk about is having purpose in what you do, and purpose. A simple example of that would be, um, I know I see my mother. She was in a community. She lived in a community, an assisted living community. And you go and she'd be in the wheelchair there. And sometimes she's been there all day. But you just go and get that pillow and kind of arrange it for her, in the back. And it's not like, oh, mom, your pillow's not straight. We need it. You want to do it with purpose. You want to say, hey, mom, let me fix your pillow. Is that comfortable? Let her know that you're doing something for her. And it's a purpose that you have with that. So that changes your attitude. It changes the attitude. If she's in, a lot of times, if you had, like Z, if you have people in bed, just being comfortable in bed and how their blankets are and what's, are you comfortable? Do you need this? You're not just, oh, here, it's cold in here. I'm sure you need a blanket. Let them know it's a little bit chilly. Do you want to, if you give them, quite honestly, you'll be surprised if you give them that choice. I'm going to put the blanket up here, and they might just go like this, well, then guess what? They don't need the blanket. That's not something that they want that moment. Or another time they might like pull it up and, yeah, this is exactly what I needed. So that's being aware of, you're watching somebody in bed. It may not seem like anything, but you're watching them in bed, and you can tell through your senses, through your listening and looking and watching, what do they need and what is that purpose that you need to give to them at that time.
So may I say something?
Sure.
Here is, I love everything you've said, and it falls on the family caregiver to be observant, and we learn from those observations. So just like you said just now, Elaine, to observe what does this mean? So it's not enough to just see, but to interpret what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Right. And I was also going to point out that although Elaine is talking about Alzheimer's and dementia and memory and all that, these things apply to every condition. Some things work better than others. My husband doesn't have dementia or MCI or anything. He has pain. But it's the same thing, especially with a blanket. I mean, I cannot put a blanket on his legs because they're in pain. He cannot have anything touch those legs, But I know that from observation, from experience, that I don't do that. And but to make a kind suggestion, and then just kind of like you just said, with purpose, to assert yourself with confidence, but not without being snooty about it. I do it all, right? Not skip the attitude, and there's a fine line, and we work on that. The other thing I was going to say about the census and all that is beautiful. Again, with observation, what I have heard is that as dementia and possibly with other chronic conditions, because usually, as far as I know, I could be completely wrong, there's a decline. 10 years after you've had whatever condition, you may be a little worse than you were 10 years ago. So things are a little bit harder. Our loved one may lose the ability to communicate what is wrong, what's uncomfortable, what is, and even especially with dementia, Alzheimer's and all that, they can't always verbalize their discomfort. So what I have learned over these years is that when there's frustration, there is often an unmet need that they cannot communicate. So communication is so important, as is our observations. And then you interpret, like Elaine said, we figure out, we see what's in front of us. And then with education, right?
Knowledge, right.
Paramount. You can't guess this stuff.
No.
It's a lot better and easier when you educate yourself, and then you can say, even from past experiences or mistakes, oh, last time mom did this, it's because this was bothering her, and as their ability to communicate and verbalize ideas, thoughts, intangible things we learn what we need to do. So anyway, I just wanted to re-emphasize those things because they're so important.
Right. And the other thing to add to that, when you see this situation and you figure out, oh, well, I'm going to do this time, and always remember that the next time that solution may not be the one that they need. And so you have to be constantly thinking about, oh, well, maybe it's this, and maybe if I did this. And quite honestly, when you get in Alzheimer's or I'm sure, and stroke victims are the same, as things go along and the mind and what's going on in the brain deteriorates, that brain body connection starts to deteriorate. They're not even real sure what they want or don't want. And so that becomes even more essential for the caregiver to be intuitive enough to say, oh, well, this isn't, maybe it's going to be this. And what can I do? It becomes more important for the caregiver to, as they learn that experience, as they've gotten more, I haven't got a word yet for it, but as they develop that knowledge over the period of time so that they know intuitively how to respond to what they're doing. But that takes time. Time is it's that gift. I call it the gift of time that you have, whether it's at the very beginning and you're getting everything together, or it's more towards the end. You have the gift of time. You've learned what you need to do so that at the end, when you're in that most difficult stage, you are more intuitive about how you're going to respond to some of these things that goes on. And it's interesting how what you did 5 years ago kind of goes away, and what you're dealing with now is the moment that you're going to deal. And those are those last ones. That's the moments you're going to have the best to remember. Most definitely.
Can you go a little bit more into more detail about the most difficult stage?
Sure. And everybody that goes that I have a thing on my YouTube channel. I have one thing right now on grief, and that's really about the very end of everything. And I know with Alzheimer's, and I think Z a little bit with you too, it's going to be different, but it's different but the same. Is that at Alzheimer's, when you get that diagnosis, for somebody who really wants to be part of what's going on, that diagnosis, quite honestly, tells you what's going to be the next decade is going to be like. That's going to be, because that's the only place it's going to end. And with Z, or it's a stroke, or it's an accident, or it's been a long-term disability, at some point, the brain and the body connections can't continue. And so we know, because it starts getting into denial and acceptance of everything, that we have to understand. Once you understand and accept and don't deny where we're headed with this, well, it's going to make that final difficult stage. It's never going to be easy. It's always going to be sad, but you can get through it if you have the knowledge of what's happening. And what makes it difficult is when people deny it. And I've seen where a friend of mine, she went to visit her mother like in the end of September, and says, oh, she was telling, it was so good to see mother. She was da-da-da. And she died like a week and a half later. I said, how was she so wonderful, But she was surprised that her mother died. Now, she'd been in memory care for like 6 years, and she was surprised at this. And that was where it's like, how could you be surprised when you're in that situation? You just saw somebody, 10 days earlier, and there was nothing about her that made you think that she wasn't going to be around for another month or something. And so that's what that is. That has nothing to do with mom or the patient. It's personal denial. You're just denying what your result's going to be. So the earlier there's acceptance, it makes all this work and this purpose and all this other stuff. The sooner we have acceptance, all this other stages and what we go through is going to be, it's hard to say the word easy. It's not going to be easier, but towards the end, you can be sad and it's going to be difficult, but you'll still have an ending and you will feel good about it. You absolutely will. Because in that difficult stage, particularly with an Alzheimer's patient, you've gone through these stages and now you're in the final stage. The first stages early stages would be like maybe 4 to 5 years. The middle stage will be probably more difficult. Might be, again, when people kind of pick up on this and what type of dementia you have or what your situation is, that's going to be the longest care time. When you get into that difficult stage, quite honestly, that's just probably going to be 2 to 3, maybe 4 years at the most, because it is the declining time. And that when you realize it, that and these stages don't just come, okay, now it's this, now it's that. It's an osmosis, it just kind of happens in the time frame. And you begin to realize, okay, we're in that final approach, and we have to start thinking differently. Hopefully in the early stages, you'd had gotten all your things together about final decisions and what you were going to do, and all that's already, hopefully that's already done. And so you're not running around hair on fire at the last minute when you are so emotionally involved. So it's it is so difficult because I've been through it, and I've seen friends. In fact, I just talked with a gentleman the other day. So he's just recently been through it. So it is difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're prepared, if you're aware and prepared emotionally, yes, you want to have everything in line and everything prepared, but emotionally, you've had a decade or more to emotionally be prepared for this. And you can start seeing things, particularly with an Alzheimer's patient. They begin to sleep more. There's less lucid moments, so that there's not a lot of talk. I've also I have a conversation on my YouTube channel with a gentleman, and he went in the last 3 years of his mother's life. He found out he was going to be her caregiver. There was nobody around. He was in his mid 40s, early 50s, and all of a sudden he became a caregiver to a woman who they'd never gotten along. He says even from the time he was a child, they'd had a difficult relationship. And he said, now when I see her where she is now with her dementia, she's even more difficult. And he had to get through this. This was brand new, so for him. So he had to do all this for 3.5 years. But in the end, he said, towards that difficult time at the end, she actually began to forget all those horrible things the way she was. And he says, I began to like my mom more at that final stage. He says, because she wasn't all those horrible things and all those horrible memories that he had. He said, I kind of wish she'd lasted longer, as if I would have known my mom in this stage, because I really liked her. So that's some good parts of it there. He said, and what it did is it made me feel that I did the best that I could. And that was all he needed to do. It was positive. It was being positive. It wasn't like, oh man, I should have done this, I should have done that. He said, I finally realized for myself, this is a year post his mother dying. He said, I finally have realized that I did the best I could do. And really what he kind of clung to was that he enjoyed his mother this last, and his purpose, just in those last few weeks, his purpose became more meaningful, like what he was doing for her. Before, he was just taking care of her. He didn't know, what he was doing. He needed help, but didn't know how to ask for help. But in those last few weeks, he had purpose, that he was helping this woman. And then when she was sick and she fell and she went to the hospital, and she was in hospice and in intensive care. And the doctor said, you need to come up and see her. He came and he said, I was shocked. He said, she was there. And he says, but she wasn't there. And the doctor said, have you got all your plans made? He went, what? He thought the word was going to be, oh, okay, she's going to be better. And then we're going to move her into another room. And then you can take her home in a few days. And but have the doctor say, have you made all your arrangements and your plans? He said that's when the reality hit for him. So that's a difficult part. It's difficult. There's a lot of different things that you start going through. What people, they're going to be exposed to different things. I know when my mother died, I was there at the bed while and the caregiver said, "Do you mind being here?" I went the other way. "Do you mind my being here?" While they were, changing the sheets and doing stuff and taking care of her. And they said, "No, that's okay if you're comfortable." And I, what I noticed the most, everybody's going to be different, was her skin was like alabaster. It was just beautiful. I said, I didn't know, I never looked at my mother's thigh before, so I'd not really seen it. But it was just, I said, "Oh, what beautiful skin." Well, guess what I learned later? In the dying process, the blood leaves, the blood leaves the skin, and it starts to it's not flowing through all the vessels and everything that's on your skin that you can see, all your color and everything. And it has left that level of area. So you're going, that's why she had that beautiful skin. Because slowly in a few days, she died because the blood vessels and all the physical bodily things that are happening besides our emotional things with somebody dying in front of us, you start noticing these other things. And I don't know, for me, that was just my moment with my mother watching that. Now, I was with another friend sometimes and she was dying, and we knew it for like 6 months. It was a very long, slow process. She was finally in bed, and she had different people were coming, and you would just come and sit by her bed, and sometimes she would talk and sometimes she wouldn't. And I was sitting there reading and she was sleeping. And then she said, "Elaine," and I went, "Whoa." I mean, like she knew, because I'd come in and said, "Hi, this is Elaine. I'm here." I did all that. And then she was like sleeping. So I'm reading a book and she said, her eyes weren't open. She still just said, "Elaine." And I went, "Whoa." And I went, "Elizabeth." And I just I just touched her head, just stroked her head a little bit. I said, "Is everything okay?" And she says, "Well, I think I'm dying." I said, "No," she didn't say thanks. She says, "I know I'm dying. And I want to go." She said, "But what if I change my mind?" And I said, it was like, and so in her mind, she's wanting to let go, but even I thought this was very insightful for somebody. She says, "But what if she's getting there to die." And she says, "What if I don't want to? Can I come back?" And I said, "It'll take care of itself. You'll know when it's time to go." She says, "Oh, okay." And it was still another week or so before she died. But that gave an insight for me. That was the only person I was that close to, somebody that I knew that was actually dying and had watched the whole process for 6 months. She was aware. She was aware. She came up. She was aware in her own little mind. I know I'm dying. She says, "But what if I change my mind and want to come back?" That it'll work out. It'll work out. So that difficult stage has a lot of different things in it. Um, and they're going to be very personal. But again, you'll be surprised how what you've experienced for that 10 years or for Z, however long it's going to be taking care of your husband, that experience, you will have gotten stronger. You've gotten more confident. So when you are in that position, when the time really comes, and the denial, by this time the denial should be gone and you're there, you know what's happening. And I don't want to say it's comforting, but yeah, you feel good. You know what? Yvette, you want to be positive. So you're going to be positive, and that this is going to be a better place. Another gentleman literally just the other day called me, and I hadn't talked to him in a while, and I saw his name on the phone. I said, "Oh yeah." And so he was calling, just updating me, because I've known him for the last 10 years, quite honestly. And so, "What's going on with Betty? How's this going?" And he said, he was telling me what was happening, and he said, "She's, I'm going to put her in, I'm finding a place." He said, the guys you recommended were just very helpful, and they're helping me find a place for her and all this." And I said, "Well, Mac, just your voice is different from the last few times I've talked to you." He said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, you know what it is? I finally accepted it was time to find a place for her." He'd been taking care of her. And so I said, have you not had any help? He says, nope, just been the two of us. So he's like Josh, the guy I interviewed. No, he'd been their caregiver solely um, with her. And he says, it's just going to be so good for me to have her know that she's being cared for and she's not here with me. That was the first time he was able to say that she was not, because he thought she needed to be with him. They thought they needed to stay together. And I said, no one is going to question your dedication to taking care of her. And his voice, like I said, was just 3 octaves higher, and he was lighthearted, and that was not his, yeah, that was his most difficult stage, Lynn, because that was a difficult time for him to finally. Now, he probably should have done this 3 years ago, but he finally, because he had insurance, they had the whole thing. He says, yeah, I guess we'll get that insurance, kick it in. Because guess what? If you do have that long-term care insurance, the minute you start using it, those big, huge payments go away. And he said he didn't even realize that until he was talking to the lady. Oh, when she finally goes to her place and they start using that insurance that he's got, that he's been paying for, he says that's going to be a huge chunk of income that he's going to have back. So yes, it's difficult. It's always going to be difficult. But if we have that acceptance, that acknowledgement, that knowledge, the knowledge and the confidence, it's just going to be different. It's when you haven't accepted these things and you're tense and you just don't understand this, that is what gets difficult.
I think that's brilliant, Elaine. Thank you. And we're going to have to wrap up, but I think
Sure.
that is you've said it, and you can never say it too many times. Is about the acceptance and the putting things into perspective, and that it's we just met in person. Caregiving Cafe just met in person 2 days ago. We talked about it starts in your head. To give yourself that permission if you need it. Accept it is what it is, and how can you deal with this difficult situation? I don't want to say best. I don't
But,
like that word because you can always, I'm sorry, what did you say?
no, I was just going to say that
Yeah.
and with being you're the facilitator for the support groups, it really comes back to the same thing. We can tell everybody all these things, but they have to make that first step. They have to take that first bite out of the elephant. They have to take the first bite. I can tell you where all, oh, these are all the places that can help you, find this church and this organization. And I have my whole resources on there. But if the caregiver has to use the help. That's another thing Josh said when I talked to him about his mother. He said, so what would you do different in all this? He said, I'd ask for help sooner.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I tried to do this myself and I can't. He says, now looking back, he said, that's what he was guilty. I didn't do enough. He said, because I just didn't know enough. And that's what he had to come back around with, like, I did my best. And so we give the information. And what I'm trying to do here is to encourage people to take that step, to do it themselves, to do it. And also to encourage a lot of people, this message, this be aware and prepared, is for people in their 40s, 50s, 60s who aren't even thinking about being a caregiver. These are things that they need to know personally in their lives so that when they're at those situations, and whether it's with a disease or Alzheimer's or just, going to work one day and making a decision about if you're going to stay there, these are confident builders that we need everybody to start activating and start doing and start being confident and positive.
Yes, excellent, excellent. Now, Brian, Z, Yvette, do you have any questions, comments before we wrap up? Elaine will still be here to listen, but if you want to ask her anything, please do.
I've got one question.
Yeah.
Sure.
One thing I've found that's very helpful is a few Facebook support groups of, people that are dealing with caregiving for their loved one. And the good thing about that is you can get some input and you learn a lot from other people's experience. The bad thing about it is you see a lot of the terrible things
Right.
that people are going through. And I was just curious, is one thing that a lot of people struggle with is that the person they're caring for is just very mean and nothing pleases them, very negative. My wife's not like that at this point. I'm just wondering, are there differences in, do I have to think, well, that's probably going to appear at some point in time as it gets closer to the end, or is everybody different in that respect?
Brian, that's 100% correct, what you just said. People do go through these periods like that. Sometimes very angry people become very pleasant, and the opposite. It's never the same, and sometimes, yeah, well, mom's been this way for 2 years. Sometimes it might just be a few months. It's absolutely different. And this is not scientifically proven or anything. It's just from my experience, what I see. It is the caregiver, and it's the lead you present. Does that make sense? It's how you lead,
Yeah.
and your confidence that keeps her from being, because quite honestly, depending on and your wife is very, if she's able to go to the gathering and interact with people and do stuff, she's still very active. So there are going to be moments in her life right now where she knows things are different. She might just have moments, but she goes, "Oh, what's going on here?" And then she'll just slip right back into it. But what you're doing is building that relationship now, because she's going to be scared when she has those little moments. She's going to be that, but she has you, and if she has you and you're confident and supportive, she may not. It's not scientific, but she'll be a calmer person, and she may not go through that. It just depends. There's so much going on in the brain and what's happening with the neurons and what the body connections and everything. We don't know what part of the brain is going to be affected by that, because that's what causes it. But even if it's being caused by something, if you have that confident, calming feeling with her, and that trust you have between the two of you, that may help divert that to the point where even if she is that way, it won't be as bad, or it won't last as long. But you don't have to, don't feel, oh, this, I'm waiting for this to come. Just know to deal with it if it shows up.
Okay, thanks.
You're doing a good job, right?
I have a little comment about what Elaine said about the best of time. Tom and I have been married for 52 years, and I had the time that we're spending together, because before the stroke, I was so involved in volunteering work and doing things for other people and traveling and all that stuff. It was just like a wonderful life. And all of that stopped. However, the time that we're spending together is so precious. And that, to me, is a gift. I want to say something about the most difficult thing for me as a wife. Watching your husband
Yes.
in pain, because it has to be lifted. And that's, to me, is the most difficult thing that I'm experiencing at this point. And it looks like it's going to be like that for maybe a long time. So I'm accepting it and just making the best of it. Like you said, Elaine, thank you for saying that, because I thought about it, and getting to know my husband a little bit more, because now
Absolutely.
we're really kind of spending quality time together.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, which is, to me, is just, I'm eternally grateful for those times.
Yeah, because this is when you reflect on that you whether you had a good life or a bad life. Some people, but you've had that good life, and it's so encouraging and nice to hear you say that the time that you're having now is so precious because you're learning even more about each
Mhm.
other, and that feeling his pain is so real. It's very real. I don't know that it ever gets 100% better, but sometimes just while they're transferring him or something, if you could just hold his hand, the two of you, just so you have, again, you have that personal senses. Maybe gets to the point where what was his favorite food? You could just have it cooking, or you just bake some cookies when the transferring people are coming to transfer. Have something there that's familiar. Just little things like that make a big difference.
Mhm.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. And I agree with you. And you've heard me say this before several times, Z. It's hard to watch somebody suffer,
Mhm.
and my husband suffers with pain as well, but any kind of suffering is just hard to take. So,
And when you the your Alzheimer's, your dementia, and I'm sure Brian's saying this, watching somebody who is vibrant and who you knew, and they're just losing everything. That is really, I think most dementia patients, caregivers will say that is their biggest
challenge probably.
grief. Yeah, their challenge is to watch that. Yeah, and what I would say you do with that is just even more so, you remember the things that were the best and you use those senses to bring back, remember when we did this, and you remember how the beach sounded when we did this, that kind of stuff. All that's important.
Thank you. Yvette, do you have any last questions or anything before we switch over to actually sharing because I'm going to start the recording and then we can share freely. Any comment or question?
Yeah, but my question is more related to I don't know if we do it after you stop the recording, is more related to the facility.
Yeah, we can
So,
talk about that.
okay.
Okay. So
My mom,
Mhm.
oh,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
stop
go
the
ahead.
recording, I
As long
go,
as it's not anything like super personal, because then if you don't,
no,
if it's
no,
okay, because otherwise,
no,
we can switch, we can stop the
no,
recording.
that's
Okay.
fine. What I'm afraid of is that my mom and my dad had been married for 6 years, more or less, and they've been like glue. I mean, one doesn't go if it doesn't go. The other one doesn't go. I mean, even though they're arguing all the time and all. The thing that worries me a lot is when they're over there and I mean, I'm not gonna have any decision, any voice. When they decide to put one in the home and leave the other at home, what's gonna happen? Or are they gonna put both in the home, even though one of them doesn't need to be there just to be with the other person. So that scares me so much because my dad is 95 and he knows it's a one-way trip. He told to his brother yesterday that he's gonna go so my mom can get better, but he's not coming back.
Right.
And yeah.
And Yvette, I think it's that because he knows that she's not going to get better, but her situation is going to be better, is what that's going to be. And that's one of those things that when your family's there and they're making that decision, because some places will have two people and one will be in assisted living, and especially if it's a community where they have assisted living and independent living together, that happens a lot. And the other thing would be is if your dad, if he is so accepting and understanding of what is going on, it won't be easy, but it could be, look, Dad, Mom's over here. I'll take you over every day and you can go see her, and that may change, but fine. If they're not going to do a double thing, they'll find a way to make his life acceptable, not acceptable, but comfortable with her being gone. They'll help to fill the void. And maybe that's by going over, because I know my dad went to see my mother constantly all the time. And then slowly he didn't do it as much because she got worse and he wasn't getting the same communication with her when he went. So on his own, he didn't go as often. Yeah. So, and that's something that your family is going to have to watch while they're up there, and how he responds is going to be the big question.
And I wanted to add, Yvette, you do have a voice. Okay. It's harder to make something happen from a different country, okay, or across town if you're not there every day. But you're a sibling. Your voice counts as much as it does now. And, among all of you, it is important. And, but I think in the end, we need to focus on the goal and what's best for your parents, not our own opinion. There's a fine line, and like Elaine said earlier, what does the future look like? I have to say this because I feel I've heard it so many times. Moves can be very difficult on people with certain conditions. And dementia or Alzheimer's is one of those conditions. So just think it through, make sure that there's plenty of support, a lot of positivity and love. I don't know if you can take a trip over there, but also remember, it has not been decided that they're going to go to senior living ever. So while it is very important to be aware and prepared, let's not assume that that's what's happening, because unless you have all decided and in your best opinion that is the best thing for them, it hasn't happened yet, and it may never happen. Okay, so please remember that as often as you remember, they could move, but they may not. Okay, and also what Elaine said, which is what I was thinking as well, they could both move together, and sometimes they have a double room and both of them can be in the same room. Okay, so there are a lot of options, and that is where you would need to speak to somebody who finds senior living communities to make sure it's the right one, and to hear about the whole situation for your parents, what it is, what's needed, and don't make a move until all of those needs are addressed, and find a way to meet them. Okay.
But yeah, well, I'm scared because they already applied and they're waiting for an opening, and that's not what my dad understands.
Yeah,
He
but
understands it's going.
Yeah, but let me just tell you, even if the opening comes up, there's no commitment. There's no, have they put money down already? Have they researched? Okay. And they might be able to get their money back. It's not carved in stone that they're going, unless your siblings have said or haven't said that they're going and they're not telling you.
No, they say when they need a doctor more often, then they think they're gonna move them to the
right.
And they know which one. And
yeah, so they're just preparing in the event that there is a need to move them to senior living. But you said several times they're going to your siblings' home or to a home first. It doesn't mean that they will they may end up over there, because we also need to be realistic and practical, even though those are not the nicest words sometimes, but we don't know those answers yet.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think what Lynn is what we're trying to say is, don't worry about stuff you don't know. In other words, you're spending a lot of time thinking about things that we don't even know is happening. So what I would recommend or suggest is that you have to have a confident way of just being and asking questions. So what is the situation? Because a doctor is going to have to sign off on this also. So there's a lot of things that they have to do. They don't just move in. There has to be a lot of other things that have to happen. And maybe just being a confident caregiver from a distance, just ask the questions. Or so how, and you're not being aggressive, or you have to do it my way. Just so are they going to be talking to a doctor? Is a doctor going to help them do this? And how is dad doing? Has anybody talked to him? Do you talk to him on the phone or something? Just quietly and calmly ask, how is this happening? One thing at a time. And like I said, right now, we're thinking of things that we don't know is happening. So we don't want to lose too much time thinking about, well, what if, find out what is happening, and then just periodically ask, so what's the situation?
All right. Thank you. I'm going to end this recording, and we'll get back, to talking more. But Elaine, is there a way for you to share your resources? And because Elaine is a speaker, she is speaking this Saturday in Austin. Do you want to tell us a little bit about
Sure. It? Yeah, I'm at the Saturday the 14th from 12 to 1. I'm at the Natural Grocers on North Lamar. I think it's 4615 North Lamar. And we're going to be discussing the confident caregiver and diet. We didn't even touch on that type of stuff. What is diet and medication and meditation and exercise? Why is that important for the personal Z? That would be important. Those kinds of things in my book that I talk on things about exercise and diet and meditation and how all those things are important to the caregiver. And then I'm on the 25th of June. There is it's called Duet. It is a caregiver website. I said, you know what, in the recording, there are going to be slides that have this information on. Am I correct, Lynn?
Yes. I'm going to send this out. I'm going to attach it. But I'm going to put this event for Wednesday, June 25th from noon to 1 Central Time.
And that's Central Time. Time.
Yeah. And that one, I'm reading what you sent me. It's this compassionate guide encourages a more informed approach to caregiving. And it is, I'm going to put it in the chat because I am so talented.
Look at you.
I am looking that it's a virtual Zoom also.
Yeah, it's a webinar. It'll be like this, but it's going to be big. Yeah, a lot of people will be there. Yeah, so you can register and you can be there. Absolutely.
Okay, yeah. And it is at Duet, DUETAZ.org. I put it on the chat.
And then there's a link to register too.
Yes. Okay. And then so I have the other one. Let me see.
And I have a website. It's the elainescholly.info that tells about the book. It's really about the book. And then the YouTube channel is Let's Talk Alzheimer's with Elaine Scholly. And that's my name up there, how you spell it right there.
Okay. And can everybody see the chat that I'm posting
already?
Okay.
Woo! Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's really cool. Yeah. So anyway, all right. Well, thank you. I'm not trying to cut anybody short or anything, but I would like to hear, the private conversation. Thank you so much, Elaine, for sharing your wonderful wisdom and the Scholly stages. I think we all learned quite a bit today, and we're going to continue the conversation about our individual situations. But thank you so much for your talk today, as well as thank you for the caregivers who are here today. I'm going to stop the recording. So, yeah, but we are staying on. We're not leaving yet. Let me just stop.
All of it. You want me to stay here too? You want me to stay here too?
Everybody stay.